April 27, 1961. Stage 14, 20th Century Fox. The set is dark and freezing, a perfect imitation of a New York penthouse. A single spotlight cuts through the dust motes, illuminating a champagne flute on a marble bar. It's cracked, a hairline fracture running from rim to base. No one touches it. The crew has been sent home early, whispers of another delay, another episode. But two figures remain in the shadows. One is Marilyn Monroe, shivering in a white ermine wrap, the script for Asterisk Something's Got to Give Asterisk trembling in her hands. The other is Dean Martin. He isn't smiling. He isn't cracking a joke. He is just looking at her, and the look on his face isn't pity. It's recognition. A silent, devastating understanding between two people who have built empires on being loved and are now dying from the emptiness inside them. What was said in that quiet, after everyone else had left, is a secret that stayed buried for decades. Because this wasn't a studio scandal. This was a confession. And what Dean Martin confessed to Marilyn Monroe that night would have burned Hollywood to the ground. To understand the gravity of that silent moment on a cold soundstage, you have to rewind the film. You have to go back to the beginning, to a world of perpetual twilight and cigarette smoke. The early 1950s. Hollywood is a glittering ghost town, all beautiful facades and rotting foundations. And into this world walks a young Norma Jean, who is being meticulously, surgically transformed into Marilyn Monroe. She is taught how to walk, how to breathe, how to pitch her voice into that breathy, innocent coo. She is packaged as the ultimate fantasy. And across town there's Dean Martin, the crooner from Steubenville, Ohio, who found his perfect mirror in the chaotic genius of Jerry Lewis. Dean and Jerry. They are a volcano of comedy, the hottest act in the world. But Dean is playing a character too. The lovable, drunken goof. The truth. Dean Martin was one of the most sober, controlled, and privately reserved men in show business. He built a wall of charm and whiskey sours to keep the world from seeing the real Dino. Two icons, both acting 24 hours a day, both profoundly, terminally lonely. Their orbits first brush in the mid-50s at those legendary parties at the Romanoffs or at Chasen's. He'd be at a booth with his Rat Pack brothers, the air blue with smoke and laughter. She'd glide in, always late, a nervous studio minder on her arm. Their eyes would meet, not with the heat of lust, but with the cool chill of recognition. "I see you, asterisk," that look said. "I see the performance." He'd watch the powerful men in the room undress her with their eyes, then discard her with their words. Dumb blonde, difficult. A problem. Dean hated bullies. It was a core code forged in the steel town bars of his youth. And Marilyn, to him, was surrounded by them. Producers, directors, agents, husbands, all taking pieces of her. He'd sometimes send a drink over to her table, just a simple highball. No note, no wink, just a gesture, a small, silent signal in a room full of noise. The first real crack in the facade appeared in 1956. Marilyn is in New York, studying at the Actors Studio, trying to be taken seriously. She's married to Arthur Miller, the great intellectual, a marriage that feels less like a romance and more like a press release. Dean is in Vegas, headlining at the Sands, beginning his ascent as the crown prince of the Rat Pack. He gets a call late one night. It's a mutual friend, a singer, voice tight with worry. Marilyn is in a bad way. She's alone in her hotel room and she won't answer the door. She mentioned Dean's name, said he was kind. Could he try? Dean, who valued his privacy above all else, who built moats around his personal life, gets on a plane. He doesn't tell the studio. He doesn't tell his wife. He goes. When he arrives, he doesn't knock. He talks. He talks through the door in that soft, smooth, Ohio-tinged baritone. He tells her stories about bombing and club dates, about Jerry's crazy antics, about nothing of consequence, just a voice, a human voice. After an hour, the lock clicks. He found her not in some dramatic pose but sitting on the floor, hugging her knees, surrounded by scattered pages of a script. She looked like a lost child. He didn't touch her. He didn't offer empty platitudes. He sat on the floor opposite her, lit a cigarette, and said, "This business is a meat grinder, baby. And you and me, we're the choice cuts." That was the beginning, not of a torrid affair, but of a pact. Back in Hollywood, their paths cross more frequently. At a recording studio where Dean is laying down a track, Marilyn is there to visit a friend. They share a coffee in a silent corner, on the Fox lot where Dean is filming a cameo. They are seen talking quietly by her dressing room door. The gossip columnists, those vultures in press suits, barely notice. They are looking for fire, for scandal, for stolen kisses in dark cars. What Marilyn and Dean had was quieter and far more dangerous. It was an alliance. He became her sanctuary. In a town of users, Dean asked for nothing. He didn't want to be her mentor, her lover, her savior. He just saw her, and she saw him. She saw the quiet sadness he hid behind the twinkling eyes and the perfect timing. She saw the man who felt trapped in the gilded cage of his own success. In her, he saw the same exhaustion, the toll of being a myth. This is where the story Hollywood tells you ends. A sweet, platonic friendship, a comforting tale, but we are not here for comforting tales. We are here for the truth they sealed in concrete, and the truth involves pressure. Immense, terrifying pressure. By 1960, the studio system is cracking. Marilyn is now more famous for her absences than her appearances. Her marriage to Miller is a public funeral. She is reliant on pills to sleep, pills to wake, her mind and body beginning to rebel against the machine that created her. And Dean is at the pinnacle. Ocean's 11 is a smash. He's the king of cool, but that crown is heavy, and it's watched closely by certain men in certain rooms in Vegas and Los Angeles who viewed entertainers as profitable pets. Men who didn't like their investments forming attachments that couldn't be controlled. The first warning was subtle. A friend of Dean's, a club owner with ties to the wrong people, pulled him aside after a show. "Dino," he said, swirling ice in a glass. "That blonde friend of yours, she's got a lot of eyes on her, a lot of interested parties. Be a shame if her problems got worse, or if yours did." It was delivered with a smile, a friendly suggestion. Dean understood the language. He'd been speaking it since his early days playing Ma-Bone nightclubs. They weren't threatening him with a broken leg. They were threatening him with a broken myth. They could leak stories, real or fabricated, that would destroy the carefully crafted image of Marilyn. Or they could turn their attention to his own life, to his family, to the delicate ecosystem of his career. The message was clear: distance yourself. But Dean didn't. If anything, the threat tightened the bond. Their meetings became more clandestine, not in hotels but in borrowed apartments of trusted friends. Not for romance, but for respite. They would talk for hours. She confessed her terror of the camera, her feeling of being a fraud. He confessed his own alienation, the emptiness he felt on stage when 10,000 people were screaming his name. He was, perhaps, the only person she ever met who understood that particular flavor of hell. It was during one of these hidden afternoons, according to a confidant who only spoke on condition of anonymity decades later, that Marilyn made a startling proposal. She was going to leave Hollywood. She was going to walk away from it all, and she wanted Dean to come with her, not as lovers but as partners in escape. They could go to Europe, live quietly, anonymously. It was a desperate, beautiful fantasy, and for a moment, those who knew him say, Dean considered it. The weight of his own fame felt unbearable, but then reality, cold and sharp, intruded. He had a family. He had debts, not just financial, but of loyalty to the men in the shadows who now considered him part of their empire. To disappear would be an act of war. He looked at her, at the fragile hope in her eyes, and he had to extinguish it. He said no. The rejection shattered her. It was the final proof that no one, not even the one person who seemed to understand, could truly save her. She retreated further into herself. And Dean, consumed by a guilt he could never voice, poured himself deeper into his work, into the bottle, into the numbing embrace of the stage. They were two stars in a binary system, locked in a gravitational pull that was slowly tearing them apart. Which brings us back to that frozen soundstage in 1961. Something's got to give asterisk. The studio's last desperate attempt to cash in on Marilyn's wanting magic. She is chronically late, ill, unable to remember her lines. The press is having a field day. She is a liability. On set, she is isolated, a pariah. Everyone is angry, impatient. Everyone but Dean. He had insisted on her for the film. It was in his contract. He had thrown his newfound power, his box office clout, to protect her one last time. But even he couldn't stop the avalanche. On April 27th, after another failed take, the director explodes. He screams at her in front of the entire crew, calling her unprofessional, a has-been. It is vicious, humiliating. Marilyn flees to her dressing room. The studio shuts down production. And Dean, after everyone has left, goes to her. He finds her on the set, sitting at that fake bar, staring at the cracked champagne flute. The silence between them is a living thing. He doesn't offer a drink. He doesn't try to make her laugh. He just stands there, sharing the silence. And then, according to the lone stagehand who remained, hidden in the lighting grid above, a man who took this story to his grave, only telling his daughter on his deathbed, Dean Martin began to talk. His voice was low, stripped of all its performer's melody. He confessed. He told her everything he had been holding back. He told her about the threat from the mob-connected figures. He named names. He explained why he couldn't run away with her, not because he didn't want to, but because the consequences would have been catastrophic for both of them, and for people they loved. He revealed the dark machinery that was actively working against her, the whispers being planted in columnists' ears, the doctors being paid to overprescribe, the whole sinister ecosystem that profited from her instability. He wasn't just her friend comforting her. He was a spy, finally delivering the intelligence from behind enemy lines. He was showing her the true face of the monster that had them both in its grip. He ended by saying, "They're not gonna let you win, baby. And I don't have the strength to fight them for you anymore." Marilyn listened. She didn't cry. She just nodded slowly, absorbing the awful, confirming truth. The performance was over. The last illusion shattered. She looked at him and said, "Only I know." Then she reached out and took his hand. It was a gesture of goodbye, of absolute forgiveness, and of shared, utter defeat. The stagehand above said it was the most heartbreaking thing he'd ever witnessed, not a lover's quarrel, but a funeral for two souls. What happened after is a blur of history we think we know. Marilyn was famously fired from the film. The studio launched a global campaign to paint her as the villain. Dean, in an act of loyalty that stunned Hollywood, refused to make the movie with anyone else. He walked away, forfeiting a fortune. It was his one public stand against the machine, a silent atonement for his private failure to save her. Less than a year later, Marilyn Monroe was dead. And Dean Martin. He never spoke of her publicly again. Not in interviews, not in his act. It was as if that part of his life had been surgically removed. But those close to him say he was never the same. The easy charm became a little more automatic, the eyes a little more distant. He'd sometimes pause mid-song, his gaze lost somewhere beyond the spotlight, and for a second the mask would slip, revealing a depth of sorrow that no cocktail could ever drown. So was it an affair? In the tawdry physical sense the gossip sheets hunt for, perhaps not. But in every way that truly matters, in intimacy, in trust, in the shared burden of a terrible truth, it was a love story. A devastating, impossible love story that existed in the silence between words, in glances across crowded rooms, and in a final confession on a dark, cold set. Hollywood tried to hide it, not because it was salacious, but because it was real. It exposed the rot. It showed that their brightest stars were not gods, but hostages. And it revealed that sometimes, the most tragic love affair isn't about what happened, but about what couldn't. Dean Martin carried the weight of that until the day he died, a secret buried behind a smile, a toast always raised to a ghost the world never knew he loved. This is Hollywood Untold Files. We don't just revisit history. We excavate the human heart they left buried beneath the stars on the Walk of Fame. If you're still here, you understand that some silences are louder than any scream. You're one of us now. So, subscribe and share this channel because the past isn't finished confessing its secrets, not by a long shot.